Hi everybody. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about, I didn't know really what title to use. I just used Facing Oblivion. So I wanted to talk about what a lot of people refer to as the left-hand path. I did the video on cannabis and the effects of cannabis from a shamanic perspective, and I found some pictures of the agoris, which are the guys that are smoking the weed in the pictures. And I wanted to talk about the agoris and the left-hand path, and I never really got around to it. But I wanted to now address that because I really actually admire the agoris a lot. I don't think that their methods are the best, but I also know that if you understand what they're doing, which is completely different from where people are coming from in the West, especially people who look to the agoris as people who justify their use of intoxicants. Because they'll, it's a very surface misunderstanding to look at the agoris and go, oh, well, those guys are deeply spiritual and they use cannabis in order to get closer to Shiva, and so therefore it's good for me. I should do that, and that will help me spiritually. But that's actually a complete misunderstanding, because the true agoris, and I'm sure there are many agoris who are either not understanding what they're doing or misusing it in the same way that Westerners are, or people who just don't have the ability to go that path without getting trapped, because that's a big issue there. In contrast, again, I don't want to make this about cannabis, but I want you to use this as an understanding for the mindset, because I'm about to get into the mindset for what I would consider to be the true left-hand path, and then I'm going to give you some tips on exactly how to do that if you want to go that route. And we kind of go that route anyway, but to really go that route of the left-hand path in what I experience to be the most powerful way, which is why I say facing oblivion. I don't think the agoris are really facing oblivion to that degree. Because again, I don't think their methods are as effective. But I want to talk about the mindset and what it is they're trying to accomplish. So they do have all kinds of tantric practices, which means, again, tantra isn't solely about sexual methods. It means techniques. So techniques that are really there to what I would call hacking into the brain, but they're really hacking into all three of the cells and hacking into the matrix of Maya, of the universe, in order to gain power. And so even the agoris, a true agori, will tell you that power is a trap. So learning how to dance with that power. So for instance, the use of intoxicants, and by the way, they use crazy amounts of intoxicants. Alcohol, they drink themselves into stupors, and they do all kinds of rituals while they do that. They do extreme things like animal sacrifice, which is not big in Hindu, world at all. They do things like, one of the things that you got to do if you're an agori is to go to the not the burial ground, but the cremation ground. So Hindus don't bury their dead; they cremate them. I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, in India, there's so many people, and there's so many people who are of low income. I mean, they wouldn't be able to afford. I mean, it's probably good that they cremate, because what would they do with all those bodies? A lot of people dying every day. There's a lot of people in India. So it's an effective way of dealing with the dead. But anyway, if you're an agori, the first thing you need to do is you need to go to the the cremation ground, and get yourself a human skull. And that becomes the bowl that you eat and drink from. So all of your food, you carry it around with you wherever you go, and that is your bowl. You eat from it. And ideally, they're happy if they find one that, I'll give you just an example. And I'm giving you an extreme example. Again, I don't think this is the I'm not trying to promote that this is the true left-hand path, but the mindset to go there is pretty important. So they have to go to the burial ground, and according to one, there's a trilogy of books, by the way. If you want to read them, they're very instructive, and they've helped me a lot. And it's called Agora, and there are 3, big books. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. It might be a combination of truth and fiction. I don't really care. Like Castaneda's books, they're really powerful. So according to this one guy, you go and while a body is being burned, one of the things you do is you sit and meditate and watch. You watch the people and the family members, and they're crying over this dead body, the person that was connected to the dead body. And as the body is sitting on the fire, one of the things that happens in cremation grounds there is that there's so much death going on, and there's so many people, that what happens is that they don't really burn the body sometimes 100%. They'll get partially burned, and then because there's a whole backlog of bodies that need to be cremated, they'll just kind of, if it's halfway burned, they'll just like push it off into the Ganges or whatever, and then get another one. And of course then comes the dogs and the jackals and the crocodiles will come and they feast on it. So it's just this crazy kind of thing that can happen in some of them in the big cities. And so what an Agori will do is he'll sit there, and hopefully he'll wait and hear for a popping sound, which is that the brain is boiling in the skull, and it's popping and cracks the skull open. And then he'll be able to go and run and catch it. And if he's really lucky, there will be bits of brain left in there. And that's what he uses. And so he's going to eat that. He's going to mix that into his rice or whatever, and he's going to be eating that person's brains. They do things like eat, they will, if there's human remains, they will do that. It's not like they live off of that. They're not like cannibals. It's a very spiritual thing, and what they're trying to get into is the mind of Shiva, the destroyer, the transformer. And they're trying to get into that place of transformation and seeing that the body, that they are not the body, that they are a soul encased in a body, and that the psychological projection onto the human body is an illusion. And so by eating that, they're saying that it's no different than anything else. And again, Hindus don't eat meat. These guys will eat meat. And that is not, so there's a whole different mindset behind that. They are going against the rules in order to get to this place of emptiness in their mind. And they do all kinds of other things. So the intoxicants that they use, like the marijuana, for example. In the West, you hear people talking about marijuana in ways that will allow them to meditate. You hear that a lot. Oh, I just use it to meditate. And then they'll talk about how it gets you into this place. One guy, I talked about the one guy who I sort of ruthlessly tore apart, but he talked about how it gets him into his heart space. And that is not at all why Agoris do it. They are very clear about it. They say, oh, it gets you numbed out. It numbs you out to your emotions, and it numbs you out to your body. And so they're doing that specifically to detach themselves from the physical world. That is not why Westerners do it. Westerners do it to feel better. They're doing it to stuff down their feelings as opposed to detach. So they know that this is an unnatural state, and they know that it's a state of potentially terror, like paranoia. I talked about that. Paranoia is one of the side effects of cannabis use, and it's because the liver feels like it's in danger. But they would use that paranoia and seek to go beyond the paranoia. So they know what they're doing. They know that they're damaging their body. They know that. A lot of them, a true Agori will actually know a lot about medicine and East Indian Ayurvedic medicine. So they know what they're doing, and sometimes they will have herbs and things like that to counteract the effect. But a lot of them are actually trying to make their body wither away. And so if you see agoris, a lot of them will be really skinny, really malnourished. They're not healthy. So it's not like they're healthy beings. You see guys when, the older agoris, they're just like no muscle tone. There's, it's not like they're overweight, but there's no, there's just, their bodies just are not pleasant to look at because they're trying to disconnect from their bodies. So again, for me, that's an imbalanced view, but I get where they're going. I get where they're trying to take their brain and they're trying to take their mindset, and they do a lot of really frightening things. So they will do things like sit in their cremation ground, and they'll do rituals to summon up demons, to summon up spirits, and they try to, knowing that what demons are trying to do is that they're trying to possess you and they're trying to control you through your own emotional failings. They try to go beyond that so that they can control them, and that's where the black magic comes in. They will use spirits, they will use ghosts, they will use demons in order to perform their magic. And they do that with the knowledge that those spirits are waiting for the moment when they can find an emotional weakness and go in and then possess them or steal their energy or whatever they do. So that is the mindset. It's a totally different mindset. It's not when Westerners look at agoris and think, oh, they're just smoking weed and they don't have any attachment to this physical world, and they're smoking weed to get close to Shiva because it's beautiful. Complete misunderstanding. These guys know that they're going into battle with their physical bodies, with their mind, and they're trying to master their emotional human limitations by taking them to these extremes, to face the fear. They're seeking out frightening situations. They're seeking it out. Not because they get a thrill off of it, although I'm sure some of them do, but because they're trying to eradicate their connection to the human body. One of the prerequisites is that they have to disconnect themselves from their family. They can't ever go be with their family again. They can't have children. They can't have wives. They can't have any connection to anything. And so they don't have a home. So they live they're homeless. They don't have any money. They don't have any possessions. They have their skull cap. That's it. That's all that they have. And then they spend a lot of time doing prayers and mantras and things like that. And all the other really frightening things that, there's other things that they do which, quite disgusting. They will drink their own urine. They'll eat feces, their own feces. Again, that's not like obviously, if you do that, you'll get sick and die. They do it enough to get past any feeling of repulsion about anything in the world, understanding that creation and destruction and life and death are all part of the same thing. So imagine that mindset. The mindset you have to be able to do that. And that is not the same when the Westerners want to go and say, oh, look at those agoris are so cool. Let's smoke pot with them. They're so spiritual, man, and they don't follow any of the rules. And people who, Westerners are doing that are not having that mindset at all. They are smoking weed for a completely different reason. They're trying to protect themselves because they're afraid of their feelings. And agori is the opposite. He's going to try and directly look at his feelings. Now, obviously, I don't recommend that path. I don't think it's effective ultimately. I don't think that, I believe that you can have that mindset of facing oblivion and still be healthy and still be balanced and all of that. So I respect the mindset. I don't think the techniques are ultimately effective because they keep you trapped. The illusion that I'm, not my body. That's an illusion. You are your body. Your soul choose to be here and choose to have a body, So I think there is a higher method of getting to that place of oblivion, that true place of spiritual warrior, where you are ruthless with yourself and you want to see through the illusion. So what I did is I experienced this through Taoist spirit fighting. And the Taoist spirit fighting tradition, according to the way I've been taught, there's some some controversy, about it, even amongst people who follow this particular sect that I was a part of. This comes from the Mao Shan tradition. Mao Shan is the Mao Shan is actually the mountain. There's a mountain called Mao Shan. Shan means mountain, so Mao Mountain. And this was the first people who started it were the Mao brothers, so that's why it's Mao Mountain. And these were actually elite people, and they had been given revelations. And actually, at some point, it became, the real genesis of it came with a woman who started. She was older in life, and she had received revelations from ascended masters. These are people who had practiced certain meditations and types of qigong, and so they shared with her. They appeared to her, according to the mythology, they appeared to her and gave her these techniques, which then she went off and perfected. And this is where the Mao Shan tradition came from, and all of the Taoist traditions actually came from the Mao Shan tradition. And the name of the tradition is Shang Qing, which means ultimate purity or highest purity or something like that. And then what ended up happening is that all of the other Taoist mountains would come and learn from these Mao Shan guys and then go off. And so you have all the other 5 mountains. They're very famous. So most Taoists, when you talk about Taoism, you're talking about these other mountains. Then, because the Mao Shan guys apparently had far more power than the rest of them, then they turned the Mao Shan into black magic, because they either were jealous or couldn't understand their power, and so they started seeing them as black magic. Later on in time, what ended up happening is after the folk magic that wanted to, black magic or folk magic that wanted to give itself a good name, they would call themselves Mao Shan when they really weren't. So that's another reason why Mao Shan got associated with black magic, because black magicians would call themselves Mao Shan so that they could have a better reputation. But what the Mao Shan were doing is they were trying to reach ultimate purity, and they were doing it through the flip side of what the Agoris would do. They followed rules of purity in terms of their body and their diet, strict meditation regimes, but they were seen as, they went against some of the societal norms in a lot of ways. And Lao Tzu is seen as one of them. And Lao Tzu, if you compare Lao Tzu to Confucius, Confucius is really about social order. He's the guy everybody loves. Your grandmother loves Confucius because he says obey your parents and blah blah blah. And but Lao Tzu was this guy who sat backwards on an ass. So the way you see him depicted is he's sitting backwards on an ass while the ass is, the donkey is going through town, meaning that he's looking in the opposite direction. So he's not following the norms. He's not stuck by those. And when Confucius met Lao Tzu, when Confucius came back and his students asked him, tell us about Lao Tzu, and he says Lao Tzu is a dragon. And what he meant by that was that a dragon appears and disappears. You don't know where he's coming from or where he's going. And he says Lao Tzu is a dragon, meaning he couldn't figure out where he was coming from. He was not following the norm. And so this is where the tradition of the spirit fighting comes in, and this is why I connected a lot with the Agoris, because one of the things I was told, I never did this, I had no need or intention to do it, is that in order to get your energy level to a high level, well, these guys were seeking to do things like, resurrect themselves from death and all kinds of other things. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get their energy level to a certain level where they can phase out of existence and become ascended immortals. Having said that, people ask me about that and they want me to teach them that sort of stuff. Number one, I never got that deep into it, so I don't have a lot of those things. But even if I could, I wouldn't, because I've come to the conclusion that that's as much as a trap as anything else. You become a perfected immortal, and then what? You still have to learn and grow. Your soul, hasn't changed. And to deny physical life and physical reality to that extent, I think, is as much of a trap as it is being wrapped up in money and society, and it's all a trap. So again, I believe that freedom comes through being your natural self, and that's why I teach people to go after their soul desire, because that's where true liberation will come from. Now, things like spirit fighting and the left-hand path can be very helpful, and it's been very helpful to me. One of the things the Maoshan guys supposedly would do is they would go to graveyards, or they would go to places where there were portals, and they taught that there were portals in the earth where negative entities would come out from the underworld. And so some people would even say that the Maoshan temple is built over one of these portals, for the express reason is that when they would come out, then they would fight them. So this is where the spirit fighting comes in. You actually physically engage with a demon. Now what's going to happen is, because you can't fight a demon with your physical body, you have to fight it with energy. You have to get your energy up to a very high level. And then, like any kind of resistance, like going to the gym when you lift weights, it's the resistance that builds up the muscle. What builds up the energy is to actually use your energy to fight a demon. Now, what demons are going to do is they're not going to necessarily come at you physically. What they're going to do is they're going to come at you emotionally and psychologically. So you have to learn how to see all of those things come up, which is what I'm teaching too. You got to let all of the feelings come up and don't act on it. Don't go one direction or the other. So anyway, I could go on and on about that, but now you understand the mindset, and this is kind of the mindset of the spirit fighters. The spirit fighters were extremely feared, and it wasn't just because they had a lot of power. They did, and they were able to do all kinds of things. They could, but that wasn't what it was. It's that, and this comes from people who knew. There was a guy, I won't mention his name, but there was the guy in Hawaii who started this whole thing off. This was way back in World War II in Hawaii. And he was there was a couple other people from different sects in Hawaii who were very high level, spiritual masters. And what would happen is that the spirit fighter, they'd be like sitting in a pool hall or some kind of, there's a lot of people around, milling around, and then the master would walk in and everything would go dead silent. And the reason for that is because they said that when he walked in the room, what it felt like is that death had walked into the room. And it had such a stupefying effect on everybody that everybody would just kind of go silent. And that death is not that this person came, he was actually a very deep healing person, but he had this ability to drive away negativity. And so what that means is that his energy level got to a certain point that when he would walk into a room, everybody's unconscious garbage would be silenced. And it was a very frightening feeling. So that feeling of death is really the death to their own ego, their own self, because this is what this guy does. He's constantly seeking to face his own death and face oblivion. So instead of facing death, which is a whole different, I think can be misunderstood, facing oblivion is kind of a better understanding. So, that the screenshot in the beginning where there's that black hole swirling, that's been my experience of what it's like to face that. And, walking into that oblivion and getting torn to pieces, being pulled apart, and only thing left is that essence of emptiness within you. So anyway, I could go on, but I wanted to give you an idea of the mindset behind it. And I want to give you some tips on if you want to go that route. Of course, I can't teach you some of the things because that can only be done in person. And, I'd have to really know that somebody was really interested in learning all that stuff. But I can help you to go down that path with what I have given you. So I'm going to give you some prerequisites here, and let me just put it up and then we'll talk through it. So if you want to, you can write these down, or take a screenshot of it or whatever. But here are the prerequisites if you want to go that path of seeking, raising your energy level to a very high degree by facing oblivion, and allowing the energy to take away from you all that which is unnecessary. So let's take a look at that. So it does take a commitment, and I've since tried to sort of water down the effect that I have on students, and no matter how much I try and water it down, at some point, everybody I work with comes to this same crisis point. And there's a lot of people that I'm working with, and some of you may be listening to me now. You are either in that crisis point or you've just gone through it, and you know what I'm talking about. It's just like it can be a very challenging, painful place to be. But what's happening is that all of your attachments to your ego, ego used in quotes, the false ego, the attachments to other people, the attachments to the world, those kinds of things are being challenged. In some cases, they're just being torn apart. And it's, there's no easy way to do it. There's, no matter how much you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to empty my mind and become, you can't, once you're faced with it, it's the same. It's challenging. So the thing to do is to acknowledge that this is what's happening. Don't try and run away from it. Following spirituality to feel good is great. I teach that. I teach that you should go after what your joy is. But I also say that when you go after your true joy, you're still going to have to run into this and face these limitations of people and wanting to please people and wanting to be pleased by them, and all the stuff connected to that. You have to really change your connection to all of that, so that your entire connection is with your own soul and with the universe. And so this is what the Agoris would do when they would make the vow to completely abandon all of their families and any kind of social life or anything like that. I'm not saying to do that, because it doesn't matter. What you need to do is to be able to have that and not let it rule you. I mean, I firmly believe in love. I think love actually is the most fulfilling thing in the universe. But, still to be able to love and love unconditionally and love fully without it completely defining you. I mean, I went through that, the loss of my partner, and it was really tough. And there were certainly times when if you had told me, yep, put a gun to your head and pull the trigger, you'll be with your loved one forever, I would have seriously considered it, because it gave me such fulfillment. But even that, I have to get to the place where even for me, there's something even greater than that, and that is the connection to the universe, connection to the Tao, connection to weird, flowing with the flow of weird. That's really the ultimate. And so the great thing is you can have both, but sometimes you put yourself through rigors in order to adjust your mindset, I think, is the most beneficial thing. There are tremendous rewards as well. If you're able to go and face oblivion, the rewards are tons of energy and tons of health. This is, people can live for really long periods of time, because what kills you is not age. What kills a person is the stress on the body that comes from struggling with the false ego. I mean, that's it. Ego is ego in the negative sense of I am separate and I am this and I need that, and reputation and things and all that. That's the ego. And the stress of that, because the universe is continuously 24 hours a day trying to destroy that in you. So there's a lot of, this is one of the reasons why people think the universe is out to get them, because it is. It's out to get their false attachments, and it is constantly sending life force energy to destroy it. This is why we live in cities. We live in cities so that we can be surrounded by other people who will reflect back our bullshit ideas about who we are and what life is about. And so we create these cocoons, which are cities. That's why monks go off into the wilderness, and live with nothing in the wilderness. And I experienced this myself when I've been off into some, powerful wilderness for, 2 weeks at a time by myself. By the end of those 2 weeks, I am not really connected to anything physical, really. And, coming back to society was always very painful. In fact, when I would drive down the mountain at the end of those 2 weeks, and I would hit right around 3,000 or 4,000 feet as I'm coming down the mountain, I would hit what felt like this barrier of psychic chatter, and I'd hit that, and it was also, I'd be driving into, lots of industrial farming, and so there's pollution and everything. So you come out of this beautiful, 8,000-10,000 foot mountain wilderness, 20 miles away from any other people, into all of a sudden you're, within a matter of hours, you're surrounded by all this industrial crap and pollution, and I would weep, because it was like, the perfection and the beauty of being like that. But to get to that state where I felt like I was connected to the beauty, I would have to go through, the first week was really hellacious. It'd be even worse now, because now I'm so addicted to my cell phone and my iPad and all that. But, disconnecting from all that, you kind of start to go crazy. So this is something that, you can imagine. I can imagine if somebody lived like that, somebody lived in that wilderness all the time, away from people. If they had a spiritual path, it could make them incredibly powerful. It can also make people nuts. That's why you hear about that crazy, guy who lives out in the wilderness and he's got all the guns everywhere and all that. It'll make you loopy. So you have to have a spiritual path if you're going to face oblivion. In any case, I'm going to go through this one by one. So let's look at it here. So let's take a look at the first prerequisite I have. So we've already talked about that. You have to have a commitment to this kind of transformation. A lot of people come to me and they want power and they want to learn all that. But, when I would train people in spirit fighting, and I still kind of have to do it now, but when I would train people in spirit fighting, they'd come to me and I'd say, okay, you're going to have a session with me and you're going to pay for it, and we're going to see if we're right for each other. So if they didn't pay me, my $50 or whatever it was I was charging at the time, then I knew that already, right off the bat, that I wasn't, it was a waste of my time, and it was better off if they didn't, if they couldn't pay me, then it was a waste of time. Because if it's really important to you, you're going to find that $50 or that $100 or whatever it is I'm charging now. If it's really important to you, you're going to find it. So there has to be that commitment. And I would sit them down and I would tell them, this is what's going to happen, and you're going to go through this, and you can't quit for at least 6 months, because what's going to happen is all of your feelings are going to come up, and they'd say, oh, don't worry, I've done a lot of self this and that, and I've been in therapy, and I've done it, and I've taken a look at, don't worry, none of that's going to bother me, because they think they know what I'm talking about, and they don't. Because there's a whole different thing than sitting down with either me or a therapist or whomever, and even a life coach, and you start looking at, some of the ways you sabotage yourself. That's one level. Another level is when the energy itself, by doing the work, starts to completely shift you, and all of your crap comes to the surface. That's a whole different deal. It feels like it's killing you. So I have to say, you can't quit for 6 months, and then after 6 months, then we'll have another meeting. We'll sit down and we'll decide whether or not this is the right path for you. And but I had to say, I learned the hard way. If I didn't have that discussion with them, they'd flip out at some point early, and I'd have to deal with all this drama and chaos. And so if they know going into it that that's what's going to happen, and they still want it, then great. Then I would initially, take them on a trial run. So you have to have that willingness to go through that transformation, not knowing what that's going to be. Might be harder if you don't have a teacher to talk to, but it can be done. So you have to have that commitment to transformation first, knowing that it's going to feel like it's killing you. But in the process, you will be gaining more and more power, because the idea is it's like having your computer that has a bunch of junk files on it and viruses. It's going to be slow. You know, you're not going to be able your computer won't be fast enough to do the things you want it to do. So the same is true with us. We have to defrag our hard drive, and by becoming nothing, we end up getting more. I think I'm going to have to talk more about this. I think I'll do that today on a live Q&A. But going to nothing is what my teachers used to say. You go from nothing to something back to nothing. So your goal is to become nothing, and not like in a, oh, please step on me, I'm full of compassion. No. Spirit fighters do not, you know, they go out. You've seen, I don't have any tolerance for bullshit. I just go straight for it, and I slice your legs off if I think you're full of crap. That's coming from a place of ruthlessness, but understand that's how I treat myself as well. I do my best to try and get to my own bullshit, which, you know, obviously I have a long way to go there. So you need to have that transformation of commitment, which is like the mindset that the Agoris have when they cut themselves off from all of society and they go to the cremation ground and they're going to eat out of a skull. I mean, you can imagine that. I mean, they're constantly being reminded of death all the time. And that takes a lot of guts and a lot of commitment to be able to do that. Unless you're insane, unless there's something really wrong with you. Okay, let's see, what else? Okay, no mind-altering chemicals. So unlike the Agoris who use mind-altering chemicals in a different way from Westerners who are trying to escape, who are trying to stuff their feelings down and entertain themselves because they don't like their feelings, these guys do it for the exact reason of numbing themselves out and disconnecting them from their body so that they can actually take a look at that. They also want to face addiction. So they'll put themselves in a space where they will become addicted, and then they want to face that. You got to have a certain mindset to be able to pull that off. So I'm not saying that. I'm saying the opposite. Because that middle ground of playing around with mind-altering chemicals is what's going to keep you trapped. It's kind of the worst thing you can do. You got to pick one or the other. But being in the middle and doing it for fun or doing it to get out of your feelings or to bullshit yourself that you're doing it for spiritual reasons is the worst place to be. So I'm going to say no mind-altering chemicals. That means no alcohol, not even a glass of wine, no beer, no marijuana, you know, no coffee, no nicotine. So anything that has any kind of a mind-altering effect, even if it's just a stimulant, we don't do that. I mean, I drink a lot of tea, but there's no caffeine in my tea. So no mind-altering chemicals whatsoever. And that's also because the energy that you're going to be tapping into is of a very high vibrational nature. And so you want your organs to become transmitters of energy as opposed to just these organs in your body that filter stuff out. And for that, you need to have a pure mindset. So that means diet as well. You know, I mean, I'm not going to be a stickler on that, you know, but obviously having, you know, hot fudge sundaes every day is not something you want to do. It's just, you know, just limit the amount of crap that you put in your body. Lots of vegetables. If you're going to eat meat, I don't recommend red meat, and I won't get into it, but I don't recommend it. I recommend organic things like chicken and obviously fish. You got to be careful with mercury when it comes to fish, so be aware of that. But chicken and fish is usually what I eat, and then I supplement it because I need a lot of protein. I supplement it with pea protein, which you can get. Now, if you're not into, you know, weightlifting or anything like that, you might not need extra protein, but lots of vegetables and you know, fruits and vegetables and clean meat if you can get your hands on it. But you know, anyway, you know, do what you have to do. You don't have to go super crazy, but you know, be smart about what you eat. Okay, single and celibate if possible. I'm not going to make a big deal out of that. If I wanted to go and get to what my teachers called the fourth set, which is where you, anyway, you get, you know, something crazy happens to you and you get to the next level. I haven't gotten that. I've gotten kind of close, but I never got there. If I were to do that, I would be celibate, completely celibate, and I would have No relationships of a romantic kind, sexual kind of at all. I would be doing a lot of work to reverse my sexual flow up my spinal column. Um, Having said that, I do not recommend, for the guys out there, I do not recommend trying to keep from releasing. You know, if you have to release, release. Do what you got to do. You got to be human. Because that can be a trap as well and all that. So I don't believe in doing anything unnatural. But if you're able to go, and I've done it, you know, even in recent times where I do certain mantras and stuff like that, which will reverse the energy, I've gone for weeks without any kind of release. So if you can do that, that's great. But the main issue is not having a relationship where you have a partner, because that you know, even on an emotional level, you are merging your energy with that person. So if you are single and you can do it, then celibate, I'm using the words meaning don't have any romantic relationships. Stay single. I did that for 6.5 years and I got a lot of power out of it. But if you're not, if that's not possible, if you're in a relationship or you're married, then by all means continue with that. Don't punish your partner because you want to do something spiritually. Then the thing to do is to be aware of, you know, watch how the energy is flowing between the two of you. But definitely, please do not punish your partner. Be with them, take care of them, love them, meet their physical, sexual, emotional needs. Just be aware and watch how the energy. That's make it a spiritual exercise to watch how your ego and her ego or his ego intermix, and watch the flow of energy and make that part of a meditation. Okay, so that's the next one. Let's see what else. So keeping outside distraction to a minimum. This is why people went into nature. Nature is a beautiful window into the infinite, and if you live truly in nature, what will happen is you'll start to find that nature will start to destroy your connection to the false ego. This is why people chop trees down, and you know, instead of going out into the forest, they bring their boombox and their dog and their chainsaw and their guns and lots of alcohol, because they don't want nature to do that. They want it. That's why they go out into nature, but you know, they use it as an excuse, like people who hunt, in my experience. Loving to hunt, you know, really means that they want to go out into nature and experience nature, but nature's a little too frightening, so they bring their guns along so that they can shoot things and, you know, make a bunch of noise, and that sort of distracts them. So you want to have a life free of distraction as much as possible. That means, you know, it's not the time to start, you know, building your billion-dollar business, you know, and working, you know, 60 hours a week. You know, that's not a time for that. You know, you just want to be able to do, you know, if you have to have a job to survive, then just go do your job, do what you have to do to survive, to pay the bills and eat, but reduce your distraction to a minimum. That means, like, you know, don't spend time playing video games or, you know, binging on Netflix like I did last night. You know, really keeping the distractions to a minimum. You know, living like a monk is a great idea. If you have the ability to go off and live in the woods without any distractions, and you can spend your time reading and meditating and walking in nature, and you know, do the best that you can with that. Again, you know, I'm not saying that you have to be extreme. You can get levels of this. You know, I never really did that. I always, even when I was practicing spirit fighting, I always lived in society. And I knew other people, and my teachers had gained tremendous amounts of power, and they all lived in society. But you know, do what you can to, you know, get more of that monk or nun sort of mindset going, if possible. Okay, here's the most important thing: the daily qigong practice. If you're doing celestial qigong, do that. Make that a daily practice. There's one guy that's, I don't think he's an apprentice, but he's really just going off on the celestial qigong, like 2 hours a day or something, and he's talking to me about how all the crazy changes that are happening, and We'll see how long that lasts for him. That's, if he doesn't, if he's not careful, he could, the psychological impact of dealing with that much life force energy could backfire. So I want you to do Qigong. I would say if you're going to go this route, a minimum of an hour a day. Don't overdo it. You got to do what you can do. Don't do more than you can do, but this has to be part of your daily practice. And, so wake up in the morning, and if you have an Ishta Devata, maybe talk to your Ishta Devata or do some deep breathing and meditation and get your mind straight for the day and ask to be helped to, make this entire day a meditation. If you don't have an Ishta Devata, then you need to get a reading from me to know who your Ishta Devata is, which means your personal deity. So you start off your day after talking to your personal deity, and if you have like a yoga routine or an exercise routine, get the blood flowing. That's really important. And go about your day. If you have to work, do whatever it is you got to do. And then when you come home, after you've eaten and all that, then spend some time, especially at night. Celestial Qigong, and the Qigong I teach is more powerful usually at night. Spend an hour. If you can put an hour in there, great. And do your Qigong routine, whatever routine you're doing. And meditate. If you have a mantra that you've given to you from your astrology reading, then what you want to do is you want to do your Qigong first, and then you want to do your mantra, and then you want to make sure to close down. Those two things together are going to be extremely powerful. And then, if I didn't go straight to bed afterwards, then I would just spend an hour just sort of being in that space and staying in a meditative mind. Take a walk and look at the stars at night. Light a candle. Do whatever you can do to keep your home into kind of a temple as much as possible. So it's the most important thing. I mean, to really, the Qigong and the energy work and the mantra work, the ritual work is really what's going to catapult you there. It's without it, it would take you hundreds of times longer to get the same effects without Qigong. So Qigong really just, speeds things up and empowers you. It's the most important thing for me, that to get you into that place of dealing directly with life force energy. So use that, but always make sure to ground. When you're done with your mantra, make sure to do the self-massage and ground the energy with the whole breath, or just focusing on the navel center or whatever it is. Okay? Physical exercise is important. One of the things that I see missing in the Agoris is that, when you look at their bodies are wasting away. So, all of the drugs and all of the, the stuff that they're doing, and they're trying to disconnect from the body and all of that. I mean, it's just, it has an effect on your mind and your ability and your spirit. So your body is here to help you. When your body is healthy, it's going to make your spirit happy. And so, physical exercise is important, and it also releases all kinds of chemicals, and it allows you to feel motivated. So if you're suffering from depression and an inability to get things done or to commit to things, at the very least, you should have a half an hour a day of some kind of physical exercise. And I'm not just talking about walking in the park. There's nothing wrong with that. But something that gets your blood flowing. I mean, get you sweating a little bit, get your heart pumping. Go to the gym and lift some weights, or ride a bicycle. That's one of the favorite things I do. Swim. Jogging, I'm not a big fan of jogging. I've never liked it. Some people do. It's kind of hard on the body. Jogging, though, or even just going to the gym and getting on the treadmill. Something that gets you, you need that, because it's going to release all kinds of positive chemicals in the body, but it also keeps you in that warrior mindset of, being committed towards whatever your goal is. And in this case, you want to be able to go and face that oblivion. You're going to need that warrior mindset. So physical exercise is real important. And then lastly, we've already talked about it a little bit, have some access to nature. So, I live in a, big part of uh, the city here. I'm on the fringes of the megalopolis of Los Angeles, but I live right on the beach, so I can walk out my door. And the beach that I have is, even though it's near the airport and all that, it's actually a pretty isolated stretch of beach. So I get to walk along the beach and the ocean, and the view, and all that, and all the little birds running around on and there's wildlife and dolphins. And so I have some access to nature that I can go to every day. But if I weren't a surfer, I would live in the mountains. I would live somewhere like I did, before when I first moved back to Southern California. I lived up in the local mountains here, and I could walk out of my cabin right onto a nature trail that went up into the woods, and so I did that every day, and I think that's important. So, and listen, if you can't have access to that, that's okay too. Not too long ago, I lived about 20 minutes inland in the middle of kind of kind of LA, and I had the only access I had was to a park. But I went to that park every day, and I sat under the trees, and I connected to nature as best I could on a daily basis. So that helps. Like I said, nature is that window that connects you to infinity, and nature will always seek to help you to get rid of unnecessary attachments. So connecting yourself to nature. Anyway, this is just a brief outline. If you're my apprentice and you really want to work with me to help dial in a specific energy routine and all that kind of stuff, let me know. If you haven't had a Vedic reading from me, I strongly recommend it, because that's going to be important for you to have, the Ishta Devata that I talked about, and your mantra and your ritual, which is in your chart. And it's also good to talk to me, because I can help you, I can tell you which videos, free Qigong videos you can use for this kind of thing. So anyway, there's my thought about that. I think I'm going to do some live stuff in a little bit and talk about what the true left-hand path is and a lot of these same ideas. So that's it for me now, my friends. Happy Easter, and I wish you all the best. And of course, if you have any questions, you know where to reach me. So that's all. Thank you very much.